Welcome here, everyone, and all of you at the satellite locations. Welcome. My name is Donovan Hardenbrook, or Don, and I have a business here, a consulting business called Leap Innovation. And my topic today is actually one that I hope is important to all of you, and it's talking about marketing, which is the precursor to selling, okay, for a lot of us. And just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I've had a very great career. I worked at Intel Corporation for many years, Salt River Project, Orbital Sciences, Sandia National Labs, and learned a lot of stuff. My specialty was putting in systems, implementing either quality systems or new product development, manufacturing improvements. So I decided I'd like to be like many of you and start my own business. And so I left in 2007 and decided that I wanted to help small businesses be successful and incorporate systems into their businesses. Because as many of you know from Michael Gerber's talk on the E-Myth Revisited, the whole concept for a business owner to get out of being self-employed is the idea that he has to put systems in place so that they work for him versus him working for the business. So with that said, I have spent a lot of time working with businesses, and probably at the top 3 issues that come up with businesses is sales and marketing is probably in the top 3, along with HR issues and basically operational issues. So with that said, let me go ahead and jump in. I have to actually mention John Jantsch. How many of you are familiar with John Jantsch? Okay, not too many hands, but he's got a book on small business marketing, and it's actually a very top seller. He's considered a guru for small business marketing, and he has several books out. But a lot of my discussion today is based on his principles, the 7 steps to small business marketing success. I'd like to start off with a little story, first of all, and maybe some of you can relate to this. Some of you are new to getting your businesses started. But once upon a time, small businesses could rely on word of mouth, yellow pages, advertising, PR, and telemarketing to grow their businesses. And every day, thousands of businesses had a steady stream of customers. And whenever they had a slowdown in their business, they could pull out their sales and marketing tools and get their sales back up. Until one day, a perfect storm hit. And what it consisted of was the Great Recession, Web 2.0, and social media. And suddenly, the marketing tools that they had didn't work as well as they used to. And because of that, their businesses stopped growing, and actually sales started declining. Because of that, they tried even harder to use the same tools that they had always used and found out that they just weren't getting the job done. The world had changed. Now, can any of you relate to that story? Yeah. I hear variations of this when I talk to business owners. As a matter of fact, many of them that I talked to, when I said this is the topic of mine right now since the perfect storm has hit. So with that in mind, I want to kind of talk about the realities of today and why that doesn't work as well as it used to. First of all, let's listen over say. There's a great book out right now by Daniel Pink. You've probably heard of him, the author. It's called To Sell is Human. And one of the things that we've always talked about in the past is you kind of shout out what you're doing and you try to get some people to hear you. Well, doing that on the World Wide Web, as you know, is very, very difficult because you may not even get on the first page, and most people won't look beyond the first page. So what we have to do is be a little bit smarter about what's going on with our prospects and our customers. So we have to listen. And we have to figure out how to do that both online, direct with customers as well, in terms of what's going on. There are over 5 million terabytes of data, last count, on the web. So people are just drowning in information. 5 million terabytes. So I'm taking that to exabytes. Yeah, exactly. Well, 5 million sounds more impressive, but that's really the issue, is that they are drowning in information. So really what they want is they need insight. And what we have to do as business owners is we actually have to provide that insight. We have to put into context how our products and services add value. And we have to be able to do that in such a way that they can find it. And you have to do it in such a way where, again, you're going to get vetted out. The reality today is that you used to have what's called information asymmetry, right? Your salespeople knew more than your prospects and customers. And today, that's not true, is it? What do you guys do when you want to research something? Right, you're going to go out on the web, right? You're going to look for reviews. You're going to talk to your friends. You know, you're going to go to whatever, right, to find out that information. So you're actually probably armed more than the salespeople are. What they have to do, again, back to the insight, is they have to understand what you're looking for, and you have to listen versus provide information. The other thing is we talked about the web is they're looking for proof over promise. You can say a lot of things, but they're going to go now and look, right? Yelp, they're going to look for reviews and see how you actually do. So we can't just say that. We actually have to be able to deliver it. The other new reality is you have to publish over prospect. Again, people in that 5 million terabytes of data, you have to be able to be found. And that means having to put content out there that's useful for people and what they're searching for. So we really have to think like publishers in terms of we have to have specific things that we're talking about that are top of mind for prospects and for clients. Another concept, again, back to this idea of we can't be shouting out about our businesses as much. We have to farm. We have to really think about the relationship now. Because the reality is that people just want a product, right? They'll go out on the web and they're just going to look for the lowest price. But what we have to do is we have to think about nurturing a relationship, getting the people to know, like, and trust us over some period of time so that they realize why they should come to you. And it's not that you're going to go out there and find them. So it's that idea of you're not going to go out and find prospects so much as you have to draw them to you. You have to invest in that relationship, the farming part, planting the seeds to build those relationships so that they want to come do business with you. So before we start, there's a lot of different definitions of marketing. We're going to use the one that John Jantz, I think, has done a good job of making practical. And the definition he calls marketing is finding a person, getting a person who has a need to know, like, and trust. So know, like, and trust. And if you think about that, it starts to bring up a lot of questions in our businesses. What is the biggest challenge for most of us is people don't even know about us, right? And we used to try to do that through advertising. Today, it's different. So we have to think about how do we get people to know, like, and trust us. And that's really where the 7 steps that we're going to talk about today is. I'm just going to summarize these, but we'll go into more detail. The first is strategy before tactics. Second is build your marketing hourglass. Publish educational content. Create a total online presence. Use the lead generation trio. Make your selling a system, and then live by the calendar. All right, first one is strategy before tactics. This is considered the secret sauce of your business. It's got to be unique. As you know, with secret sauces, let's say we could even use Coke as an example, right? Nobody gives the recipe away, right? Nobody gives the recipe away on the secret sauce. Yeah. But it tastes good. The idea is it tastes good to your prospects. So we want to think about that as our strategy. And strategy here, we want to be more than just, high level about it. What does that mean? What we mean, first of all, is we need to identify our ideal client. Now, a lot of us confuse this with our target market. Ideal client's a little bit more than that, and we'll get into that. The other thing is define a core difference that's important to your customers. Not what you think is your core difference, but what your customers see as the core difference. And then last part is we need to connect the dots, which is to put our strategy and our tactics together in such a way that you run a successful, campaign to grow sales for your business. So here's the idea of ideal prospect. If we draw this matrix of profit and referrals, it's up that upper top quadrant that we want. Because here's the dilemma. If we have customers that aren't very profitable to us, right? We're not really delivering a lot of value, but they keep referring people to you, guess what you wind up? You wind up with a lot of low profit customers, right? Is that really where you want to be? Probably not. I don't. Okay, I don't want that. On the other extreme, we could have a highly profitable customer, right? Ideal, we're adding lots of value to that person, but they're not referring us. Have any of you been in that situation? Because it's important. They don't understand how to refer. Yet, you want more people like that, right? Because you're delivering the value, and that's how you're going to sustain your business. BNI, I saw a survey of their members here recently, And they were asked about referrals, and it turned out that they believed it was 60 to 7% of their business is dependent on referrals. Okay? And we know a happy customer is a great referral. We just know that. So how do we make that happen? So again, think about your customers, and are they ones who will refer you, and are they, profitable for you? That's what we want to think about. The other piece is how do you find that out? This says, I'm going to have to pay thousands of dollars for market research. No, you don't really. Okay, it could be actually go talk to the ones that you have, and ask them questions like this. Why did you hire us? What one thing do we do better than anyone else? Because what is that? That's going to be your differentiation as we get into that discussion. What could we do better? Yeah. Would you refer us? Have you referred us? No. And then the other one, which is critical for us as we start thinking about our online strategies, what would you Google to find us? I'm currently doing this with a client right now. They're in a very niche market. They are a machine shop, though there's hundreds of them here in Phoenix. But even through this process, we found through interviewing 5 of their clients what is unique about them. Okay, so you can find that. It's not complicated. You just got to take the time to actually talk to your clients. Maybe I think my longest one was 25 minutes. Okay, and they're really willing to share. If they're ideal clients of yours, they'll share that. And the other part is you get an added benefit is what? It's an opportunity to remind them that guess what? They might need your product or service again. So it's worthwhile to do. Okay, another concept. How many of you have heard of the sales funnel? Okay, yeah. Sales funnel is this idea of, man, if I can get exposure to a lot of people, right? Eventually, I'll hit one or a few of those who might actually be interested in my product and service. And the social media stuff right now, if you think about how Facebook and Twitter and all these are, kind of how some people are trying to use that, they look at that and they go, oh yeah, there's almost 1 billion Facebook users, and if I could just get a little fraction of some of those people to buy my product and service, I would be great. But the reality is that funnel is broken. We know that businesses do not spend the time, once you make a sale, have you ever thought about, do you ask to sell something else? Do you cross-sell another product or service that might be of value? And do you ask for a referral? Are you systematic about doing those things? And for most businesses, the answer is no. So the concept that we'd like to introduce is this idea of what we call the marketing hourglass. And the marketing hourglass, it takes the fundamental process of, hey, we know that referrals are our best source for new leads and new business. So how can we leverage that? How can we create a user experience, a prospect, right, of taking a prospect from know, like, and trust, remember that definition of marketing that we mentioned earlier, to try, buy, repeat, and refer. And then once we've done that, right, they've referred, you can tilt that hourglass again, right, and you take the next prospect through that same process. Now the question is, do you have consistency in how you do that? Have you really thought about the customer experience? And is it one that they enjoy? A good example here, most of you know about Disney World, right, as a service, right? That whole thing's designed for what? A great customer experience, right? And they keep coming back, and they tell other people about how great of an experience they had, and they come back. I would use Apple as an example of a product, right? If we think about their iPhones or iPads or MacBooks or whatever, but people like that, right? And so they have a great experience, so they're endorsing that, right? It's free advertising for them to get people to do that. So that's the concept that we want to do is what kind of, and those aren't done by accident, right? The experience that Disney World puts together, Apple puts together is designed with that idea in mind. Is how can we maximize the user experience, the customer experience. So we all have gaps. And how we fill those gaps is what's going to be important. The way you do that, though, is you actually start from the bottom. What would make an ideal referral for you, right? What system do you have in place? And then how do you get repeat business from your existing clients, customers? And how do you get them to buy? How do you get them to try your product, right? Maybe you sell a high-end product and they just can't, you don't have enough know, like, and trust yet that they're willing to bite, right? So is there something else you can offer to get them to at least experience your company and what you have to offer? All right, step number 3 is publish educational content. How many of you blog? Show of hands in here. Okay, a few of you blog. How many of you post articles on, respond back to social media channels, like on LinkedIn groups, things like that? What we have to start doing, back to that concept earlier, if you have to publish content, is we have to start thinking, what am I doing of the content that I provide that they can find? Again, this is all, in most cases, 80 to 90% of the research done is done on the web, right? Either through referrals or looking at information on the web. So you have to be creating a body of work. It's not just random blogging. Okay, I'm not going to talk about, I'm eating at my favorite restaurant. Okay, you have to be thinking about what is it, again, that's your point of differentiation, that's information targeted to your ideal client that you can put out there. And you have to be very consistent about it. You have to get those followers. Some of you may know Michael Hyatt. He's the former CEO of Thomas Nelson. It's a big publishing company. But he started doing this pretty regularly, the same idea. He started blogging. And I can't remember, he's got some followers on Twitter, a couple 100,000. Got 70,000 people who follow his blog. But he just started doing this, but then he started getting strategic about it and thinking about what he wanted to write. And we can all do the same thing. All right, so the different aspects of the content, first of all, we talk back to the know, like, and trust. We have to have content that builds trust. You know, they need to know that you know what you're doing. Okay, you know, if you just talk about something and you're not speaking from a level of expertise and knowledge, then you're not going to build that trust, right? I don't talk about, for example, my wife likes to do interior design and likes to look at stuff like that. I don't talk about that because every time I give her my opinion, she discounts it because she knows I don't know what I'm talking about. So you have to have content that actually builds trust. The other one is you have to have content that educates, shows people how to do things. And you do this through the communication on your website, papers that you might be available there, again, surveys that you're providing, information that you're providing. So you want to educate. And that educational content, again, needs to be online. You don't have to do it all yourself because I'll tell you just from my own experience right now, I'm in that stage of blogging where it's still kind of a chore. I do it, but because I have it on a calendar, I'm doing it, but I don't necessarily enjoy it. Okay, I got lots of topics, I just haven't sat down and wrote them all. So you want to see if there's other ways to get content, and a great one obviously is customers, you know, testimonials, referrals, getting them on video, having video parties. Invite your best customers in and have them just talk about, you know, not only your business, but maybe give a video shot so they can have a clip for their own that they can put on their websites and on their, you know, all their outposts. The other is, and I do this one a lot, is I just take other people's content. I don't steal it. I just retweet it, repost it, you know, things like that. But again, this back to this insight over information. What we need to do is we need to be information aggregators, right? We need to have this process of where we're putting information together that's valuable for your targeted prospects. And you're going to do that naturally. I do this naturally because I'm reading stuff, right? I'm always reading stuff about my business, about the industry, about my customers. So I'm just naturally, you just collect this stuff, right, and you share it back. And there's some great tools to do those, by the way. Okay, and then most important is we need content that closes, okay? People, again, want proof. So, you know, if you have success stories, are you showcasing those, right? Are you showing the value of your product or service? I have like most of you, you have your hands in lots of different pies. I sell LED lighting, for example. Well, one of the big sales is I have to compete against fluorescent lighting, like probably the ones in here. So how do I show, you know, depending on what they're interested in, I got to show either there's a good ROI or they've got better lighting or whatever, but, you know, they want to see proof of that. I usually get the example, well, tell me of a place that you've gone, you know, that you've done an installation. So it's going to be the same thing, but except we have to look at it more online. You know, how do they have that proof that that you can deliver? Because again, it's about that trust. Okay, step 4. I'm sorry, I'm not moving here. Total online presence. A lot of different people will tell you how you need to look at all the various tools that are out there, social media, websites, email marketing, you name it. What we have to think about, though, is where do we control the customer experience? Where do you control the customer experience? The only place you get to control the customer experience is your website. Think about it. I wasn't real happy when the last Facebook change happened. Okay, I bet you a lot of people who were making money doing various things with Facebook now had to go back and try to refigure out how it's working, and maybe it wasn't working to their advantage. LinkedIn has done a bunch of changes. What you find out is these outposts, as we call them, need to be driving traffic back to your website, because that's the only place, again, where you get to control the process of getting people to know, like, and trust you. Now, everyone will tout their way, but you have to understand, if it's not driving them back to that consistent experience, you're going to get inconsistent results. We can't talk about online without talking about search engine optimization. It's this big thing. We're going to use a very simple analogy here, but it's basically the wrapper is the content. Again, it's got to be framed into what your prospects and customers are interested in. Keywords are the meat of search engine optimization. What you're putting in when you write these blogs, when you post information, when you're building web pages. You have to be making sure that you're loading those up with the right keywords so that you can be found. And then the other part of that is the linking to other people's articles, linking within your page. But those links are also things that the search engines are looking for to help them with determining whether you're a relevant site or not. And then the social media part is actually the raspberry on the top. It's not the main thing, but if you've done all those other things, then that's going to, again, drive this complete thing where now you have something that's going to be helping you from an SEO standpoint. It all has to work together. Does that make sense? All right. Last thing while we're talking about content is this was the disappointing one for me. Nobody really wants to read your blog. I don't get a lot of responses back to my blogs. I'm just but that's not the point. The point of the blogs, again, is this idea that you're providing content, okay? And that content is searchable and findable. It was kind of interesting the other day. I was looking at, if you're not looking at analytics on your website, you should be. Okay, Google Analytics is there, and you really should be. But I was interested that people were coming to my site on a blog that I had put. But as I started looking at why that was, is I had put an image of a tree with a root system in it. And they were coming in from images.google.com. So really, they weren't interested in what I had to say. They were just looking at the image. And so now I'm thinking to myself, wow, I've got to do something different here. But images now are still a way of search engine optimization. So you got to think about what you're doing, and you really do have to put that idea of, am I putting in content that, again, is going to be found online? Because when somebody has a problem, I don't know about you, but I put in a problem, like how do I do this? Most of what comes up, if you look, is usually a blog. It usually is a blog, okay, or a YouTube video, right? If it's something like how do I change the colors on my WordPress site? Okay, I know it sounds mundane, but you want to see, people want to see a visual of how to do it, not just read the text. So you have to keep all of that in mind. So the pillars of a web presence is, again, listen first. Do you guys have listening posts? Are you keeping track of what's going on in terms of your industry, your customers, your competition, topics of interest? You have to create those listing posts. Google Alerts is a good tool for doing that if you're just starting. You need to optimize your web content. Again, it's easy to build a page, but have you loaded it up with all the right keywords for SEO? And there's claim your real estate. There's a lot of free real estate out there. Yelp, Google Places, Yahoo, Bing, they all have places where you can put your information in. And again, that comes out on when you do the search and people are looking. Optimize your brand assets, again, being the consistency here, both visually and name-wise. And do you have your customers? Are your customers actually giving you, reviews? Are you asking for those reviews? Again, that's going back to that content that can be generated by other people to help you. And then my most interesting one is social media participation. Okay, are you participating in social media? I've got a great example. I volunteered my time with a nonprofit, Extreme Faith Productions. They just did a Canyon Music Festival over at Grand Canyon University, and a year and a half ago, they came. I was trying to help them with marketing, of course, and they came talking to me, and so I started saying, "Well, how many people do you have on Facebook?" And he goes, "We have about 600 people," which is not bad, you know. But I asked him, well, how many people do you have on your email marketing list? He goes, oh, he's effusive. I've got 50,000 and 30,000 here in Arizona. As you guys, like me, could draw the same conclusion. Okay, well, you're targeting young kids, and email is not their preferred, right, communication tool, right? At that time was Facebook. So I'm going and saying, you know, let's figure out how we can drive the social media participation up. He may have today, and this is a year and a half, he may be at 16,000 Facebook likes at this point. But he integrated that into what he was doing, both online and offline. But that's the same thing. If he can do it, believe me, that's a very niche market that he has. You know, Christian kind of hard rock music is what the people like. But he's been able to do that. So I look at him and say, if he can do it, you know, any of us can do it as well. Because he did that through just, again, combining online, offline, putting content out there that they wanted to see. All right, number 5, lead generation trio. Really, the three-legged stool here is advertising, PR. Oops, lost my mind here. Advertising, PR, and boy, just lost it. Let me go on through. Advertising, first of all, advertising is done differently today, as you know. What we recommend is you don't go for the direct sale. You actually, as we've talked about, you need to educate. So you educate, and then if they see the value in that, then you go to the next step of trying to sell to them. Online, offline, it all needs to be done the same. If you're sending out mailers, for example, you're not going to send out mailers to provide your product and service. You maybe want to consider some educational content. We propose the educational piece as a leverage, again, to do that. But, you know, if you're in the business of, talked over here, hydraulic cables, right? Repairing hydraulic cables, well, maybe you want to send something to, you know, the 5 symptoms of when your cable's about ready to go, right? Or something like that. You want to do that, and then they'll see that, and they go, oh, you know, maybe I better go check that out. And then maybe they suspect that, right? And now maybe they'll call you up because you provided some value to them, you know, and that's free educational content. So you want to do that. Again, hold that accountability. If you say something, you want to do it. But that's advertising piece. The public relations, in the old days, again, these things have changed. In the old days, you might send out a press release, right? Hey, we're announcing our latest, you know, mega product, you know, that does slices and dices and does all that. But we don't want to do that today. Really, it's more about establishing the relationship with the PR community so that you can be, so that they'll come to you and rely on you as a subject matter expert to provide maybe some insights and do some articles like that. My PR person, Acre Inc., I'll give them a little bit of free advertising. They introduced me to Patrick O'Grady, who now is the managing editor of the Phoenix Business Journal. But he covered the technology beat, sustainability, product and business stuff that I was interested in. So we formed a nice relationship. And every now and then, not all the time, but every now and then he'll call me to comment on an article that he's writing. And that's great because, again, PR is free advertising for us if done correctly. So you want to really have an idea if you see something of interest. And if you haven't heard of HARO, H-A-R-O, Help a Reporter Out, you can subscribe to them and you can find out all the various articles that reporters are looking for, you know, to talk to somebody about. And you can tweak it to whatever industries you're in. But that's a great way, again, to be able to offer your help, but they really establish that relationship. So pitching it, the press releases you still need to do, but really the importance is emphasis on the relationships. Okay, referrals. How could I forget it? There was the other third one I lost my mind on. Referrals. This is more than the current way we might be doing referrals. And in the past, like I mentioned before, people might ask when times are getting a little bit, sales are getting a little bit dry, we might call some people and ask for some referrals, right? Or check up with some past clients. What we really want to do is we want to create, again, a referral system. And what we're looking at, first of all, is you've got to be more referable. Do people know how to refer you? Are they referring your ideal clients? Remember, we talked about that, right? You need to make sure that you're getting profitable clients, right? Not the unprofitable ones. So do they know how to refer you? And have you communicated and educated them on how that referral system works? Because if somebody, if I asked you guys, what's your favorite restaurant, right? I would get some very glowing remarks. And people are more than willing to give referrals. You just have to ask for them. It's human nature to want to help. But what we have to do is make sure, if I'm giving a referral, I'm not going to give you a so-so restaurant, right? So you have to make sure that what you've done with that person has been a good experience. Otherwise, I'm not going to give you referrals. Because I'm kind of giving and lending my credibility, right? If I tell you about a restaurant to go to and you have a lousy experience, right? Okay, I'm probably not going to refer again. So we have to think about how we're doing that with our customers, the ones especially that are ideal. And the other part is, if something good happens from a referral, are you communicating back to the person who referred you, hey, thanks for introducing me to so-and-so, we did some business, thank you so much. And some people say, well, we can incent you or something like that, but it's typically not a monetary thing. If I have a great experience at a restaurant and I tell the person who referred me about it, they just are happy to know that, they did something nice, right, and enjoyed it. So you can think a lot of different things, but you have to have that system in place. Otherwise, you're not going to generate referrals. And as we said, this is, from a duct tape marketing standpoint, that's how you sustain and grow your business. It's not through trying to just get new leads all the time on your own. It's about that referral system and generating it for you. All right, number 6, step 6, make selling a system. The reason why we want to have a selling system, and maybe some of you have experienced this, I know I have, if I don't come in and follow my sales process, what happens is the prospect decides to use theirs, okay? And that usually doesn't work out very well for me. You know why? Because they're looking to compare apples to apples, right? And we want to be the orange, okay? Right? We want to be able to differentiate ourselves. It's not an apples-to-apples comparison. So their process usually is, and if you work with a corporation, you know this, right? Because you're working with procurement and purchasing. And guess what? Fill out this form because my engineer told me this was the requirements to do this, right? Or my technical person. So you're filling out the form, right? You never really get much opportunity to tout how you're different, right? How you're going to bring more value to that company. And that's the challenge. So we have to make sure that when possible, that we've created our own selling system. Because again, that's part of that experience that we're wanting to convey. But we want to be able to emphasize, right, where the value add is in terms of what we're offering. And that's why you have to have that system. Let's say a good example of this is people who get caught up between products and services. I'm sure a lot of you provide products and services, right? Solutions. Very often when you see something, they're going to ask you about the product, right? How fast, how quick, how efficient, et cetera, is it? But if you're providing a service or a solution, right, there's a more value add to it than that, right? And that's what you want to be able to talk about. So that's why you want to have your selling a system that you want to be able to employ that when possible, because the default is not in our favor. So lead conversion or sales is really this whole thing of how do you walk them through that? Discovery, do you even have a good fit? Again, you want an ideal prospect. You need to vet that out right away. When I was first starting up my LED business, I was just happy to have somebody, to talk to, okay? But I wised up. I spend a lot of energy on the wrong types of prospects. So I found out, I need to have a little bit of questions and talk before I just walk in and start doing, my service. So you want to figure out a way to figure that out real quickly, because again, if you're providing a service that's not going to be value added, you're either on a low profit customer or you're going to have an unhappy customer, and you don't want that. Is there a presentation? It doesn't have to be a seminar. It could be a workshop. It could be a lot of different ways, but you can talk to them. But then again, it may not be the right time. You've got to continue to nurture that relationship. Do you have, a periodic newsletter? Are you touching base with them in a systematic way so that you stay top of mind? And then that other part is when you deliver that sale, is it the same? Are all your salespeople trained the same way to manage, right, that client as they go through that process? All right, and this is step number 7, live by the calendar. Really, how many of you feel a little bit overwhelmed by all the stuff we just talked about? Because it's a lot of work. I've done a couple of group sessions now, taking people through the Catalyst program for duct tape, and that's as much advertising I'll do. But the whole point becomes as they get to this point and they realize, there's a lot to do, and I can't do it all in the time of this 20 weeks, believe it or not, it was 20 weeks, they just get overwhelmed. And the reality is you don't have to do everything. How many of you intend to be in business 6 months from now? And hopefully that's all of you. Okay, good. Because the point is you can't do all of it overnight. You've got to build. You've got to kind of look at what can I do? What do I need to start with first to build that? So you build it a little bit at a time. A lot of people don't even do a newsletter. Can you do a once a month newsletter? Start with that. Can you blog 2 or 3 times a week? And maybe daily, it's just, again, touching base with your clients, following up, maybe even, doing some social media if that's appropriate. But start with one, get comfortable with it. Once you think you've got a handle on it, you put the next system in place and start doing that. But you have to start. The whole point is here, if you don't start putting that in place and giving time and space in your calendar for marketing, you'll just get overwhelmed by all the day-to-day stuff that happens. It's a lot more fun, quite honestly, to deal with the fire of a client and make sure you're making them happy than to go out and blog. Okay? From my own experience, I know that. Because it's sitting down, if you're action-oriented like most entrepreneurs are, you're wanting to go out and do something, and sitting down and typing something just doesn't feel productive. So I can relate to that. But you have to do that. So with that said, I've wrapped up my part of the talking pieces of this. I would encourage you, there's a card up here too, of those of you who are, I think it was Tim back here, has a QR reader kind of part to his business. I've got a card up here. If you want to download this and you have a smartphone that does QR codes, then you can certainly do that too. But more detail, offering educational thing of what I just talked about here to do that. But with that said, I'm done with this part of it, so I'm going to go ahead and answer questions from, I don't know how I get the questions from online, but I'll take questions here from the group. And again, thank you for bearing with me. Okay.